the big developing story over the last kind of 48 hours has been revolving around Ante Juric. He is the head coach of the men's team at Sydney United 58. Yep. He is also the part-time, it must be said, head coach of the Sydney FC women's team. However, he reportedly is being barred from coaching in this Sunday's contest in the Australia Cup round of 16. The game is played at 3 p.m. on Sunday afternoon. That's where the three little snuck in there. But there's a bit of drama here. So, of course, Ante Juric was the coach of the Sydney FC women's side, and then he has gone to the club and essentially asked permission to also accept this opportunity that he was presented with Sydney United to be the coach of their men's team, of course, being a foundation club in the Australian Championship, leading into the inaugural edition of that competition. And one of the conditions reportedly is that he agreed to as well at the time is that he was not allowed to coach against any Sydney FC side. Now, that clause has already come into effect once before when the team played the Sydney FC NPL youth side, where he was not on the bench. And it seems that Sydney FC are again enforcing this rule for the senior side as well.
Yeah, and I think it's come up before as well when he was coaching Sydney Olympic,
yes.
And at that point in time, Sydney FC never raised it as an issue, and I believe he was allowed to coach in that fixture, which is where a lot of people, there's a bit of uproar about that. It's kind of hypocrisy that now that it's a big fixture, round of 16 of the Australia Cup, that now they kind of take issue with it. But like you said, it's something that he agreed to when taking a position with Sydney United,
point, isn't it? This one is pre-agreed.
It's like players being cup tied, right? You kind of know that that's going to happen when you move from a club that you've already made an appearance for in the cup to another one,
or even like a loanee, right?
Or even a loanee, right? Yeah, exactly. And with a coach, all the parties are aware that this was, had the potential to happen. So they made sure that it wasn't going to with these clauses in the contract. And I've seen a lot of people, the issue that people point out as well is that, well, he's the women's coach for Sydney, but the men's coach for Sydney United. So how much overlap is there really there, right? In terms of, he doesn't know any of the Sydney players necessarily particularly intimately in terms of, how they play and how they set up. He doesn't have much of a say in that, presumably being focused mostly on the women's side of things. But the key thing here is that it's from a betting perspective of because there is that clash between the two teams that he is employed for. Theoretically, there is a risk that he could be involved in changing the outcome of a betting market, right? Which is something that we've seen a few players land in hot water for recently. Part of the reasoning is trying to make sure that even the coach can't have that kind of an impact as well. But
so I don't completely buy that argument, to be honest with you. I'll tell you what, and this is something that Mark Ivancic, who is the president of Sydney United, brought up as well with an interview with the Sydney Morning Herald with Vince Rugari. Apparently his claim is that he had a long conversation with Mark Aubrey and that kind of gambling perspective was never brought up once.
Interesting.
And I think there are always risks, as we've seen in football. There are always going to be risks of gambling manipulation. And as far as I'm aware, as you say, does Ante Juric have any involvement as well? I understand he's a Sydney FC employee, but I understand the conflict of interest. I don't really buy the gambling argument. If they can say that as whatever they want, but I don't think that's in Sydney FC's interests. What is in Sydney FC's interest is not allowing an employee of you to have a competitive advantage against you, which is the legitimate thing. And as you said, for me is the same case as a loan player. Like, sure, you can have him on loan, but essentially, if we come up against each other, I don't want to be paying him to play against me or to coach against me. And so that's where the issue lies for me. And the fact that it was pre-arranged is, they've actually agreed to these clauses. And look, can you look back at the precedent at Sydney Olympic and say it's a bit unfair? Yeah, probably. But maybe that is a mistake that the club identified at the time and said, let's make sure this doesn't happen again. And
exactly.
That is the
and
reason.
I mean, they rectified that with in the NPL this season, right, by not allowing him to do it in the NPL. So it was like, they've clearly recognised that, hang on, there is the potential for him to theoretically have this conflict of interest and gain an advantage over us, and we're employing him to compete against us. So let's make sure that that can't happen. And if everybody's agreed to it, I don't really see what all the fuss is about, to be honest.
Exactly. Well, I mean, there's no like legal fuss, right? It seems like on that side of thing, everything is, the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. But I do understand the level of frustration from Sydney United, right? And I think another point that Ivancic made in this article in Sydney Morning Herald, which you also kind of have to nod your head at, is why is the need for Ante Juric to go out and have another job, essentially, alongside his role as the head coach of the Sydney FC women's side? As we know, it is still not a fully professional competition. They say it's professional, but it's not for 12 months of the year. And that is the case for every player and most coaches in the A-League women's competition as well. And to be, arguably definitely one of the top 2 biggest clubs in the country, why is Sydney FC not paying what has been as well an incredibly successful coach of this women's program? Yeah. Dominated alongside Melbourne City, have been the powerhouse of the A-League women's competition. And they've got a coach who has been incredibly consistent for them over a long period of time. And they're not the ones breaking down that wall in terms of offering him a full-time contract. We've seen Adelaide United, to their credit, despite some varied results, do that for their coaches. And Wellington Phoenix, who, if you haven't been paying attention to the moves they've been making in the off-season, they are going to light up the A-League women's competition this season.
They've got a lot of good pieces there now.
They've brought in Bev Priestman, obviously the former Canadian coach who had that whole Olympic drone saga. But she's on a full-time contract. My understanding through Paletti is that her assistant is also on a full-time contract, which is pretty unheard of in the A-League women's. And they've gone out and recruited quite heavily in terms of talent in their players as well. So the question has to be asked, if Wellington Phoenix are seeing the upside of doing that, why are Sydney FC not?
Right, exactly, and that's it, right? It's you could understand if, like you were saying, it was one of those smaller sides where perhaps there's not been huge success with the women's team recently, and B, perhaps not as much of a market to really invest in, as bad as that kind of sounds. But with Sydney FC, you're one of the biggest clubs in the country. You've been one of the best women's sides for 5-6 years now, and yet you're still just treating women's football the same as the rest of the country, which is just not taking it seriously enough. And we've seen what women's football can bring to the country, to sports just in general in this country, with its influence and its impact. And yet we're still kind of seeing that this struggle to really kind of recognize that importance. And I think that, honestly, I kind of hope that Wellington come in and dominate and just sort of show, like, you can't rest on your laurels anymore with this sort of stuff. Like, the rest of the world is investing heavily in women's football for a reason, and it's evolving. Why is Australia stagnating in that regard? The A-League women for a long time, or W League as it was then, was one of the top competitions in the world for women's football. And now it's falling behind because everywhere else in the world, they're going, hang on, there's something special here, and we can really tap into this and put some money into this and have something big. We're seeing it in Europe. We're seeing it, obviously, the States have always kind of been the forerunners for that. It's just stagnated here. And there's big financial issues with clubs. We know that, but it feels like it's such a missed opportunity. And yes, for Sydney, I mean, it would help because then, Ante Juric doesn't have to go out and get another job working as a football coach for a team that's also based in Sydney that then ends up playing against Sydney in the Cup. So you kind of avoid the whole conflict of interest. But it's also just giving respect to the game and investing in a growing product. And we've not seen that outside of, like you said, a couple of clubs. Adelaide, who I think, only really over the last couple of seasons have started to see the benefits of that with some better performances, and obviously a history-making performance last season, getting all the way to the semi-finals. Wellington, like you said, have gone in heavily, both in staff and players. So, I think it's going to get to a point where these other clubs, they kind of realize that they're a step behind, or at least that's what I hope so. Because it's just, it's crazy at this point that the coaches and the players are still not full-time professionals. That's mind-boggling.
Well, to bring it back to the original issue, Sydney FC versus Sydney United, really for me jumps off the page in this round of 16 as one of the marquee fixtures Same city, of course, they don't get an opportunity to play against each other very often. Sydney United have a famously very hostile crowd. It's still early in pre-season. How are the youngsters? Are Sydney FC going to play? Still no Douglas Costa. He's still in Brazil, ironing out some personal issues from what's being reported. So it's going to be a really fascinating game on Sunday afternoon. The other fixtures over there is Nawading, which is the third-tier Victorian side that obviously had that record-breaking win over Darwin Olympic.
Nobody expected that. That's
crazy.
Crazy scoreline.
Just let that sink in. A team from essentially the fourth tier of Australian football now has the record for the biggest winning margin in an Australia Cup National Stages game.
Silly.
Absolutely wild. But they play at the same time on 3 o'clock, and then the other game before the release of our next podcast is Metro Stars versus Macarthur. You want to pick a couple of those and pick them apart for us?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll start with Metro Stars and Macarthur being obviously from South Australia, flying the flag. They've wrapped up the MPLSA season. That's done. That's in the bag. They've been basically unstoppable, untouchable for most of the season. They've had players leave and go elsewhere, and they're still performing extremely well. And obviously, they'll be representing South Australia in the Australian Championship when that starts up in October. So looking forward to seeing them take it to the other, best of the MPL clubs in the country. But this is a game that, Macarthur, I think they'll be shaking in their boots a little bit perhaps because, yes, it was a comprehensive performance against SD Raiders that they had, but Macarthur, I'm pretty sure, don't have the best record against South Australian sides in the Cup. I'm pretty sure they lost to Campbelltown a couple of years ago in South Australia, obviously. So, they'll be returning here, and Metro Stars are arguably a better side than that Campbelltown side were. So it's going to be a really tough test for them. And, we've kind of praised a lot of what Macarthur has been doing in terms of some of their recruitment and kind of identifying these undervalued players and, giving them a chance. But yeah, this is going to be a genuinely tough test for them, I think. And I think Metro Stars, they could be looking at this fixture and going, we've got a chance here to make it through to the quarterfinals. And obviously they're the only South Australian team left in the competition, so they've kind of got everybody here behind them now. So yeah, it's going to be a fascinating one to watch for sure on Monday night. I'm not actually sure where it's being played. I'm sure it has been announced, but I've not been paying too much attention, to be honest. But no, it's going to be a fascinating match for sure. I reckon it could be a very, very close one.
So get me up to speed on Nawading as well, because obviously with my travels, it was very hard to watch football while I was over in China.
Yeah.
The great digital wall had its difficulties being passed. But obviously crazy for them to have such a big margin, as we said.
Yeah.
Now going into the round of the 16 against Wellington, who, paying attention to their transfers, still look a little bit underdone.
Yeah.
But they obviously went the distance in the round of 32 and was stretched a little bit in that game. Do you give any chance of the third tier Victorian side pushing the Phoenix into the quarterfinals?
I think what I really liked from Nawading that we saw in that round of 32 fixture was just that they were unrelenting. Like they didn't let off for even a second to give a chance for Darwin Olympic to come back into it. It was just full throttle the whole time. And I think that's the sort of intensity that MPL sides can kind of bring to this competition that perhaps A-League sides can't, because it's so early in the preseason that they've not had a chance to really build up to that intensity. And I think that's the real advantage that they're going to have here. It's going to be probably a young, inexperienced Phoenix side again. Chiefy, he's changed a few things tactically already. He's changed the back, the defensive formation. He's played with a back four and a back five and sort of moved things around throughout the game to try and find what fits. So it seems like he's not fully 100% set on what he wants to do yet. So yeah, Nawading, I think they can come out and be really aggressive. I would expect the Phoenix, even if they are playing a younger side, to have a bit too much quality for them. But we weren't expecting Nawading to go and put 9 past Darwin Olympic. Sure, maybe expecting a win or it to be a close match or something like that. But to set the goal scorer record or whatever it is, the winning record, winning margin record in the Australia Cup, nobody expected that. So maybe again, the fact that nobody's expecting Nawading to really come away with much from this one, it kind of plays into their hands a little bit again. So no, I think that what we'll see is they'll be firing on all cylinders again and playing with a lot of intensity, that it might take Wellington a little bit of time to come into the match and try and actually match that and get a foothold in the game. But no, I do think that Wellington will have just a little bit too much for them in this one.